and welcome to ATARC's After Lunch IT webinar series. Today, we will be discussing what innovation is happening across government to move to a more proactive security posture. Our panelists will also be discussing what their agencies are doing to improve breach detection in response to a landscape where they are inundated by new, rapidly evolving challenges. My name is Kirsten Patton, and I am the Working Group Program Manager here at the Advanced Technology Academic Research Center, and I have the pleasure of moderating today's panel. I want to welcome all of our attendees, and special thanks to Jill Bradshaw, Adam Koka, Petko Stoyanov, and the rest of the ForcePoint team. They've truly been an excellent partner here at ATARC. This afternoon, we are going to hear from our panelists, which will then be followed by a Q&A where we will pop in a few poll questions as we go and answer your questions. So I would like for my panelists, will you all please come on video? And I'm going to introduce them briefly, and then I'm going to give them the opportunity to share a little bit about themselves and what they're up to. So first off, we have Larry Ponemon, Dr. Larry Ponemon. He is the chairman and founder CIPP at Pineman Institute.
Greetings.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Greetings to everyone.
Oh, greetings, thank you. And we also have our panelist, Claire Barrett. She is the Chief Privacy and Information Asset Officer over at the U.S. Department of Transportation. Next, we have Paul Blahush, who is the Chief Information Security Officer over at the U.S. Department of Labor. We also have Gregory Crabb, who is the Chief Information Security Officer and Vice President at the United States Postal Service. And last but not least, we have Petko Stoyanov, who is the Chief Information Officer over at ForcePoint Global Government and Critical Infrastructure. So we have got an awesome power-packed panel today. And just a reminder to the audience, if I didn't say this already, please post your Q&A in the Q&A chat section. We'll be sure to get to them as we go through our panel discussion. So first, I want each panelist to add a little bit of color to your role in the government and what you're up to. And I'm going to start with Larry, please.
Oh, thank you very much. So my name is Larry Ponemon, and I'm the chairman and founder of Poneman Institute. And we are a boring research company focused linearly on information on cybersecurity, data protection, and privacy. We're in our 20th year as an organization. We established the Institute to be a global institute. We currently operate in 26 countries. It's a pleasure to be here. I noticed some names, panelists who I've worked with before, and it's nice to see you again after so many years. So anyway, that's the spiel. I'm going to serve as the research wonk for the rest of the afternoon session here, and hopefully I could get to participate on the Q&A as well. So I think that probably consumed almost 3 minutes time. I'll turn it back to you, Kristen.
Thank you. I would like to next hear from Claire.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Claire Barrett. I am the Chief Privacy and Information Governance Officer at the Department of Transportation. So what that encompasses is primarily our privacy management program, so both the e-government side and the Privacy Act side, but also I have responsibility for records management and the dreaded PRA program. So from the vantage point of this conversation, I am more of a consumer of the tools, right, and the process. I don't own any technology in my office, but I am tied at the hip to our cybersecurity team and to the tools and the processes that we develop jointly in order to manage attacks, but also really my interest, a lot of what I focus on is not so much the prevention, but the identification of where our assets are, right? So that in the event of an attack, we can respond appropriately.
Excellent, thank you, Claire. I would like to next hear from Paul.
Yeah, hi, my name's Paul Blahush. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer at the U.S. Department of Labor. It's great to be here. Cybersecurity is obviously important to me. It's in my title. But sound, effective, cost-aware application and execution of cybersecurity are also vital to the success of the Department of Labor. The department's mission is to foster, promote, and develop the welfare of the wage earners, job seekers, and retirees of the United States. We do this through such things as improving working conditions, advancing opportunities for profitable employment, and assuring work-related benefits and rights. Now, to help accomplish these goals, the Department of Labor has 27 agencies with varying individual missions of their own, whether that's protecting 401ks, publishing economic data, inspecting mines, providing workplace safety protocols, and unemployment insurance information. Some of those have been very vital during this COVID pandemic. Now, while these agencies' missions and needs vary greatly from an IT perspective, they all have in common a need to protect the information systems that store and process sensitive data and provide essential services to the public. So the topics we're discussing today, breach prevention, detection, and response are key points in those protections. So just to give you some insight into Department of Labor, IT and cybersecurity, a challenge that we have, and I'd imagine this is shared by some others, is we're looking for ways all the time to eliminate and minimize the unknowns. Unknowns in our own environment, where we don't really know what services are being exposed out on the internet or where the critical data is being stored, but also keeping up with the unknowns that are out as far as the threat landscape goes. And I'd like to share a success with you. We're very proud that on a dime, we moved the organization to about 95% remote telework at the beginning of the pandemic, which a colleague just reminded me was 1 year ago today that we went to full-time telework. It's hard to believe. And we did all this without any disruption in service to our constituents, and that included any disruption that was due to a cyber incident. So I look forward to hearing from my fellow panelists and in sharing applicable experiences and challenges at the Department of Labor. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. That was excellent. I would like to next hear from Gregory, please.
Kirsten, thank you very much for having me this afternoon. I'm very excited to represent the United States Postal Service, the organization that you know and love that comes to your mailbox every day. And I'm a 25-year law enforcement professional, the last 5 of which have been as the Chief Information Security Officer for the organization. There's a lot of technology that's necessary in order to be able to deliver your mail. You can imagine that every carrier has a device to be able to scan those packages to know that they've arrived. There's also massive amounts of back-end infrastructure. We run one of the largest retail infrastructures in the country with over 31,000 facilities. And we have a huge SCADA infrastructure in order to be able to sort all those mail pieces. They're not sorted like on Men in Black with the alien doing the sort. Rather, we actually have large pieces of automation equipment that allow us to make delivery. The last year has presented a lot of challenges to every organization, obviously, from a resilience perspective. And I'm very proud of the way the Postal Service is delivered over the holiday season, with over 1 billion packages almost delivered to be able to support all of the communities across the United States. We also, right before having to deal with the SolarWinds and the latest Microsoft situations, had to protect the election. And I was very proud of my operations team and threat intelligence team working with CISA to be able to deliver a secure election for the country. So love the discussion and the panel that's about to ensue. So thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely, thank you. And over to you, Pico.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for being on this panel. I think it's really interesting that we're all very interested in data protection. For years, we've always focused on the gates, guards, and guns, and it seems like now with remote, it's become much more important about the user and the data. And I'm the Chief Technology Officer for our Global Government Division. So that's all of our government business that ForcePoint does. And most of you might know us as our cross-domain company or a data protection company that has lots of DLP. I would say we're all of those, and we've been focusing on everything around zero trust, getting an idea of how the user is accessing the data and everything in between. So ensuring that the user can access it effectively through the right network access. And we understand we're using that user behavior to inform the data protection strategy and the network access. So thank you for the opportunity to be part of this panel, and I'll hand it back off to Kirsten.
Great, thank you guys. Thank you all. So before we jump into questions, I wanted to circle back to Dr. Ponemon. Was there any research that you would like to share with our audience before we continue on?
Sure, I'd be pleased to. For just a little bit of background, we just completed, in fact, yesterday, we completed a new, the latest and greatest Pineman study. And basically what we looked at, what the title is Survey on Solving the Data Loss Problem in the Federal Government. And so this is a specifically focused study. We had some really interesting, somewhat startling results, but for the most part, they were interesting and not too startling. We don't want to give people a heart attack when we do a research study like this. So let me just talk a little bit about what I saw as the most important findings, and I will have a chance, I'm sure, to discuss this in greater detail later. So firstly, large data breaches are a big problem to agencies, and that's true for both small to large agencies, departments. 61% of agencies reported having a data breach involving the loss or theft of more than 1,000 records containing sensitive or confidential information. 88% reported more than one significant data breach during this time period, the last 2 years. 54% reported these incidents resulted in significant disruption to the IT and IT business process. Now here we get to some interesting results. 63% of agencies reported the number of cybersecurity incidents increase in the past year, and 65% reported the severity has also increased. Now we measured severity in terms of IT infrastructure, damage to the infrastructure, leakage of high value assets, information assets, time to discover and time to contain. Only 15% of agencies reported that they were able to discover the breach in 40 days or less, and 53% reported the incident took more than 100 days to detect. So again, these results are pretty overpowering when you think about the implications. 55% of respondents gave their agency a low rating in terms of their ability to prevent cyber attacks. Now this is a survey. When you do a survey, you sometimes get what's called the halo effect. People tend to overprocess how good they are and underprocess how bad they are. And so basically to get a 55% bad rating is really an enormous indicator of a problem. We also found some other findings that are directly related to what we're going to talk about today. 84% of agencies believe that zero trust, the architecture is important and they're looking to adopt it. It's still a very small percentage of the total, but zero trust is viewed as kind of the gateway to some really good control and over privacy and data. So anyway, more to come. If you're interested in seeing this paper, first we have to write it since we just completed the field work. And that's my job. I'll write it and send it to you to get your feedback, and hopefully you like it, and that certainly makes my day. Let me turn it back to you, Kristen.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing those findings with us. So we are going to pop up our first poll question, actually. Alyssa, if you could please put that up for our audience, and panelists, please feel free to answer the poll as well. And the poll, for those of you who are not at your laptop, is what best describes the maturity level of your organization's digital transformation today in FY 2021? The options are: you are in your early stage, middle stage, late to middle stage, or a mature stage. So let's take a couple seconds, and if everyone could go ahead and answer that poll, please. And then we will show the results whenever Alyssa feels like we have had enough entries at this point. So Alyssa, if you could please pop up the results. All right, let's see here. More middle stage, digital transformation activities are planned and defined, but only partially deployed. Interesting. So I kind of want to circle back to the findings from the research. With 88% of agencies reporting a significant breach last year, it is surprising that many agencies believe that they are approaching a maturing state in their digital transformation. So that, along with our poll results, Alyssa, maybe you could put that up one more time for those to see again. Let's talk about it, our panelists. Does this surprise you? Does this make sense? Or do you feel like you understand where that disconnect is? Who from the panel would like to jump in first with some thoughts? Let's see.
All right. I'll jump in.
Go for it, Gregory.
Kirsten. So Greg Crabb here. I'm a 25-year law enforcement professional, and I've worked financial crimes, cyber crimes for a great number of years in my career. And I think that if we compare what we're doing in information security to what a chief financial officer does in the course of their work, no CFO can provide 100% assurance about the effectiveness of the controls that they put in place in order to be able to stop fraud or abuse in the financial system. And I think that when you compare the tools and techniques that an information security practice can employ, you've got the same framework. We're trying to defend our nation against threat actors such as nation states that are applying massive amounts of resources. These organizations have large militaries. They have, you see that in the form of tanks and battleships and submarines, but you don't see that in the context of a cyber threat. And when you portray that onto the control sets that agencies have to implement from a management perspective, there's no organization, commercial or government, that can withstand, through the use of controls, a cyber attack. And so from my vantage point as a law enforcement officer, we can do the very best that we can to implement effective control structures. We have to look to resilience in order to be able to assure that our assets maintain their integrity. And we have to go after and recognize that threat actors have a significant interest in accessing or disrupting the assets that we attempt to protect.
Yeah, thank you. Definitely. What about the other panelists? Claire, did you have anything you'd like to add?
Well, not to be glib, right? But the way I think about it is, so I ride motorcycles, right? And it's a question, not a question of when you go down. It's right, not a question of if you go down, it's when you go down. And then the question becomes how much padding, right? How good is your padding on you? Are you wearing a helmet? Are you wearing Kevlar? Are you wearing shorts? Are you wearing jeans? Those sorts of things. And that's how I think about our threat environment and right, the attacks that we face, the threats that we face, and how we protect our networks and how we protect our systems and our assets. I can't prevent the threat actors from coming after us, right? The question is, what have we done? And have we understood where our vital organs are, right? Have we put the helmet on the head, whatever that is within your organization, right? To protect you from when you go down or when you get hit. And I think that's one of the challenges that we have in all organizations, and I think it's common across government sector, private sector, is the proliferation of IT. Right. I've spent a lot of time in the past couple of years working with our portfolio rationalization team, trying to identify where we have duplicative systems, duplicative capabilities, but also in our spend and our cost accounting processes, right? Who's controlling the IT budget so that we know where systems are popping up that are being deployed that don't even have basic protections, right? How do we bring those into the fold? And so I'm not really surprised by the, I don't see it as a disparity, right? You can be very technologically innovative and advanced and mature while still having immature cybersecurity program or immature protection. And that's unfortunate, But I think that's the reality, right? And so it is all a risk management decision about where are you spending that budget, right? Have you identified what's critical? In the security tools that you have, I know a large challenge for us and something that we are continually striving for is we have all these tools, we have all these requirements. Have we made the most of what we have? Do we understand and have we fully tuned our technologies and our services to support our risk? And then I think the other challenge is absolutely, on the resource side, is just on the people side. A lot of our processes, I would say, are semi-automated, right? Semi-digitally transformed. If you have a process that is automated, but then, right, in order to communicate the message, you have to like download a report and send it out via email, right? That's almost an air gap in terms of your processes. And so I think there are a lot of things that are halfway transformed, particularly in the cybersecurity space, where we have a lot of information, but we haven't really managed the process of synthesizing that data and that information and getting it out to decision makers.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Any of our other panelists want to chime in before we move on?
I do. I think it's actually kind of interesting. The poll that everyone answered on the webinar, they said 18% of them thought they were mature in the digital transformation. Yet we have almost 90% reported a breach last year. So we are either optimists or our digital transformation is not aligned to security, or security is not aligned to our digital strategy. And maybe we just need to work better of tying security into that transformation to the cloud or modernizing applications. But it makes me wonder, do we have the right security budgets? Are we thinking how to move, to build security in, or baking it in, so we're moving left of the breach instead of waiting for the breach to happen and then, let me do the lessons learned on that one breach. Yet when you look at the lessons learned, a lot of times it's a lack of data visibility. I think I've heard earlier, not understanding how users are using that data or where that data went, or sometimes you find out it was one person that had that breach. Was it a lack of training? But I love the fact we're optimists in this. I just want to make sure that the optimism is, we factor in the right budgets going forward for some of this and making security in, because I think this is an opportunity for us as a government agency, as we start looking to modernize our infrastructure to bake that security in. So
Definitely. Yeah, thank you. Paul, were you going to say something too? Oh, you're on mute, Paul.
I can find the unmute button there. Yeah, that would be good. Be very interested to see the details behind the study. We don't know who was asked. We don't know what context was put into what's a significant data breach, what's a large data breach, the timing of the incidents, what was determined to be, well, that was when it started and that's when it was detected. Who was asked these questions? So it'd be interesting to look under the covers of these. I'm not sure we learn much more than having something to talk about with what data was presented here. So, and I'll give you, for instance, if you went and asked maybe sort of an individual program in our area, if they had a significant data breach, they might say yes. But from an organizational level, it was determined not to be very important. It didn't impact us, right? We lost 5 records. That was a significant breach to us, right? And it caused us problems. But from an organizational level, it wasn't. So some of us are answering from an organizational level instead of a, down in sort of a program level where maybe they do answer yes. But I think Claire wrote my talk there. She said a lot of the things that, certainly resonate with myself. So I'm gonna leave it on that.
Thank you. So we're going to go ahead and pop up the second poll question now, since it kind of dovetails into our next question. But the poll question is, have data breaches affected your agency within the past 12 years? So we want to hear from our audience again. Yes, no, or you're unaware. So please go ahead and take a moment to answer that poll, and then we will pop up the results here. Just give it a couple seconds. All right, mostly unaware. Okay, so The next question, when thinking about data breach in your federal agencies, what are some strategies to improve data breaches, or sorry, to improve breach detection and response within a federal agency? So let's talk strategies. Who from our panel would like to chime in first?
I can go ahead.
Go ahead, Paul.
I'll channel Claire, okay? Because I think if you don't know what you have, you don't know what you need to protect. So at least I know in Department of Labor, you know, again, a challenge that we have is I need to make sure of where all our stuff is. What's all the stuff that's being exposed in some way that's more exposed to an attacker, right? And where is our critical data? And in an environment where there are not unlimited funds, I wish maybe there were, but there aren't unlimited funds, and folks need to get their work done, right? Where is it most beneficial to apply these security controls? Because a dollar I'm spending on security over here is money that can't be spent over there, whether that's for securing that service or piece of information, or it's to provide service to the public, right? So first of all is knowing what we have and what's important to protect. And so I'm going to start with that's the most important thing to do, to start looking at reducing the breaches.
Excellent, thank you. Any other panelists wanna jump in?
Well, channeling myself, I think one of the things that we are working on, and I think is important, particularly from a privacy management standpoint, is understanding the normal movement of data within your organization, right? So this is one of the pieces that I've been focusing on this past year in concert with the cybersecurity team, is not just where are my assets, but what's the normal behavior of those assets, and what is the appropriate data sharing, right, between systems, and how does data move throughout our organization? Because it is one thing to say that, you know, system A is or is not important, right? But the threat is, but that data from that system is probably passed on to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 other systems, depending upon what the original system is, right? And so there are downstream effects. So even when we're doing the business impact assessment, I think very often those assessments are locally focused, right? They're focused on that initial system and not the downstream activities. And one of the things that as a privacy officer, right, I'm particularly interested in is, well, where did that data move? Where was it supposed to move, right? And because I think the nature of the threat is obviously changing, right? You know, when I started in cybersecurity 25 years ago or so, and I was on the security side of the house, right? It was a lot of ransomware, right? That's what it was. Is we went, you know, the attackers came in, they, you know, bungled up your system, they encrypted it, right? Then, you know, and you couldn't get to your data. And then it was, well, we confiscated your data, you know, or they made copies of your data. Well, the next threat in my mind, and then what we're starting to see is, well, you know, manipulating your data and populating that through the system. And that has real, you know, impacts in and of itself. And again, my focus was on the privacy side, but this is a significant threat space, I think, for government, right? Is managing not only like the pure security of the data, who can get to it, but right, the integrity of that data as it moves through the channels. And so that's where in the preventative side, right, it's not just your system architecture, it's your data architectures and understanding the flow of data and what systems are relying upon each other.
Great, thank you. Gregory, anything to add about how breach detection in federal agencies can be improved, strategies?
Sure, of course. And I think that Paul and Claire provided some very good context relative to asset visibility, as well as your overall ability to manage data governance. But I think information security is not one set of controls. I think it's a combination of controls that applied across the entirety of the organization can help that organization float on a good capability. So risk management is extremely important. And one thing that we really are proud of in our Postal Service program is the Executive Cyber Risk Committee, that we have representation from all of the major executive leadership teams, and looking at risk holistically for the organization, understanding not only the vulnerabilities that exist within the infrastructure, but also what are the threats and who are the threat actors that are engaged in the types of attacks against the infrastructure, and how do we then apply the different tools of controls, whether it's a people-based control, a process-based control, or a technology control, to be able to address that particular risk. And at the Postal Service, we have a massive training and awareness program that's extremely important to keep those kinds of ransomware threats out of the organization from a email-borne attack perspective. We also, from a process perspective, leverage a very robust maturity model necessary for us to assure that we have all of those control sets, whether it's vulnerability management, or whether it's asset definition and management, or the incident response, from threat intelligence, from a situational awareness perspective, all the way up to incident response. And then the technologies. It takes a lot of technology in order to be able to apply all of these different controls. And I think Claire made a very good point about making sure that those technologies are tuned properly in order to be able to provide protections over whether it's an information asset or a software asset, or what have you. My contribution here is, it's not going to be one thing that saves us from a breach. It's a collective investment in people, process, and technology focused on the objectives of protecting the organization.
Mhm. Thank you. And then Petco, before we move on to another question.
No, I think it's great that we're focusing on people, process, technology. I'm curious, was there any, from SolarWinds, I'm sure lots of had a lot of lessons learned regarding technology, supply chain. Was there anything that said, I wish I invested more in, taking that, dollar off looking at it from $100, where do you invest your money? Is there anything you guys learned and gals where we should invest more in certain technologies like DLP or identity, or user behavior analysis or asset behavior analysis? I heard earlier. Is there any one technology you said, I wish I did more of, or you did do of, and you're successful with?
Well, Petco, there was some luck involved, but also some, skill involved, that we were not adversely impacted by SolarWinds. It's not to say we didn't have some SolarWinds installed in our environment, but we didn't. The threat actor did not move beyond the initial device. I think that part of the reason for that is that, for the most part, those devices could not talk out to the internet, which was the first thing that malware then tried to do once it executed, was go out to command and control. And that's not to say that would stop it altogether. I don't know if the malware then could try to pivot and move laterally to try to find a way out. But we just know that we saw it trying to go out, couldn't get out, and then it just stopped. So in some ways, that's what helped us, having that control in place. But I think that's more of a classic security control, right? That's a perimeter security control for your old gates, guns, and guards model. But in the new one, I think what would have helped there with SolarWinds is a entity behavior type analysis, because that SolarWinds box, if it was compromised and got the orders, was going to start doing strange things on the network. And it's my understanding of that attack. It was going to start doing things it hadn't done before, which would be your behavioral analysis.
No, thanks for that. I'm glad you guys are not part of the breach. I was just thinking, focusing on the threat intelligence, we're always looking at what's happening outside of our network. How does that potentially impact us? And sometimes threat intelligence is also inside of our network, how things are behaving. And I just was curious if there's technologies like that that you guys have found that inform your future lessons learned.
You know, I'd like to add a little bit on, I'm very grateful for my endpoint detection and response software that was installed on my endpoints. That was an extremely important technology in this particular situation. Similar to Paul, although we had SolarWinds installed, we were not impacted by the adversary. And I think to one of the organizing principles of this discussion, and I know we're going to talk about it in a lot more detail, it's that zero trust approach that we all need to be striving for in order to be able to make sure that those information assets are compartmentalized away from each other and controlled in a manner that we know how they're communicating and why they're communicating. I think Claire made some really good points in that regard earlier.
All right, thank you. Going back to the reports found by Dr. Poneman, Larry, this one's for you. The trends reported for significant breaches were concerning in your findings. So in your opinion, why are advisories so successful in today's environment as it relates to breaches?
Well, I'm not sure that it's successful in today's environment. But I think, can I just step back a little bit? I think we talked a little bit about enabling technologies that we view as being more important than others. In the survey itself, we looked at a whole bunch of different technology and categories of technology. And what rises to the top is data loss prevention, identity management and authentication, cryptographic technologies, analytics for cybersecurity, intrusion detection and prevention, network traffic surveillance, DevOps and secure SDLC, and user behavioral analytics. So this is kind of like the top 10 list. And it was interesting how consistent it was across domains or agencies and departments. I didn't mention this before, the sample size that we're referring to here is pretty significant. It's over 600 qualified respondents. And if you want to know the details of the methodology we use and the process we go through, just give me a holler. Anyone who's listening in, and I would love to talk to you. We live in northern Michigan, which is a very lonely place. So when people want to read our research, I get all excited about it. So keep that in mind. It's not that lonely. In the winter, it's tough, but it's a pretty neat place to live.
Sounds good. Thank you. We just had an audience question come through. Philip asks, what do you recommend as a means of endpoint protection when talking to a typical consumer device, be it a desktop, laptop, tablet, or mobile phone? So anyone from our panel have any insight into that? Gregory looks like he does.
There's a lot of technologies that are becoming very much a commodity as it relates to endpoint technologies. As a government employee, I'm not allowed to advocate for one brand. There are a lot of very strong brands that are in the marketplace. I think that you need to understand and try. One of the things that we've done in the Postal Service is implement a security technology evaluation program, and doing proof of concepts and having an opportunity to examine how that technology is going to actually interoperate with your whole control stack is extremely important. And so you have a company like ForcePoint that really can fulfill a need. Bring them in, figure out if they're going to interoperate with your infrastructure. And it doesn't have to be a long pilot to understand whether it's going to work or not. It does take some devoted investment, but there's a lot of good providers out there. And I think that mobile and desktop, two different animals. I deal with a lot of mobile, obviously from my infrastructure, and I have some very specific needs relative to being able to handle mobile at the scale that I do mobile. So mobile device management is something that we have a lot of expertise in, where other organizations may be more generic in how they apply mobile defense for their organization. So, that's just my 2 cents worth relative to the question. Good question, though.
Great, thank you. Any other panelist recommendations? Paul looks like he wants to answer.
Yeah, like Greg, I'm not going to pitch any product here, but I think that to the person who asked the question, certainly an endpoint protection solution should be part of what you're looking at to in your toolkit for your cybersecurity. I think what I've found are the most successful implementations, though, are those that start out as an all of business approach. The endpoint protection or anything else has to make sense for your business or your mission or your agency and what you're trying to protect. And it has to be an all of business. And what I mean by that is you can't do it in a silo just of, hey, this is a great cybersecurity solution. Your operations team needs to be able to support it and probably use that tool. You're probably going to hand it over to them to be the ones who operate it on a day-to-day basis and have to maintain it. And then your users also are very important. You don't want to be putting something out there that actually causes the problem. It disrupts their ability to get their work done. So take these things as an all of business approach, considering usability, considering manageability, considering cost and return on investment, right? If you get this product, does it allow you to save costs somewhere else? We just did an analysis about that, right? If we went and got that, does that belt and suspender with something else we have? And then do we need both of them? And can we offset some of the cost by phasing out a different product? So, yep, look at endpoint protection and consider it in an all of business approach.
Thank you. We are going to move on to our third and final poll question soon, but any other comments from the panelists before we pop that up? Claire?
Well, I just wanted to build on that idea of the all in business approach. I think one of the challenges that we face is that, cybersecurity protection is seen as the responsibility of the cybersecurity professional. And it can't be just the responsibility of the cyber team or even just the responsibility of the IT team, right? It must be a whole of business approach to include your financial teams, right? To include the business and mission owners, to include, we get our annual cybersecurity training and that's part of it as well, right? So I think one of the things that the SolarWinds incident has highlighted for us is in part that need to bring in those other communities of practice into the discussion and into the knowledge base to understand, when we say we're trying to protect something, it's not just to tick off the compliance metrics or, to do something because CISA has directed the agencies to accomplish something. There is an end goal and there's a mission impact. And that has to be not only an all of business approach in terms of developing the solution, but again, all of business approach in terms of understanding risk and keeping up with the threat vectors and keeping up with the threat landscape to understand what's an appropriate response for your organization and defining risk tolerance, et cetera.
Yeah, definitely. Excellent point. Thank you. So we are going to pop up our third and final poll question now so that we can all get our CPE credits. And this third poll question is going to be, how has the volume of cybersecurity incidents changed in the past 12 months? So I guess that's right around the start of the pandemic time. And the options are significantly increased, no change, decreased, or significantly decreased. So please take a moment to answer that poll. And then I have a question to follow up with it that I would like to ask our panelists. So Alyssa, whenever you feel like we are ready for those results, let's see what our attendees had to say. Okay, so mostly increased or slightly increased. All right, so question that I have is, how has the pandemic led to your agency having better practices in the future as far as dealing with breach detection? And then if you want to elaborate on what those best practices are, we can do that as well. But pandemic, let's talk about it. Who would like to start? Paul, I think you're talking. Are you talking?
No, I was exhaling. Going,
Oh.
Pandemic's been 1 year. There's lots of good ideas, good business practices that came out of the pandemic. I like curbside pickup. I hope they continue that. I like remote work some of the time too. I hope maybe that continues also. But as far as what we're sort of doing that would go into breach detection, I'm not sure we did anything different about breach detection and response that we wouldn't have done otherwise, right? Pandemic or not. I do know that one thing we increased was more a continuous awareness and education program for the user community. Probably before the pandemic, we were all in for National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and we would do a lot for that, but we weren't doing things continuously throughout the year. And once the pandemic situation started, we did that. If it wasn't every month, it was a little bit more, I would send something out as an all-employee email, an announcement about, hey, be looking out for this, be looking out for that. Because the bad guys were trying some things during the pandemic that were a little bit different. It's like, you need to be aware of this. Who remembers the Zoom bombing right at the beginning of the pandemic? So we did some education stuff about that. Like, here's things to look out for. Here's things to be aware of. I said, you join a meeting and it's not hosted in a secure way, you might as well be talking on the street corner. So just be aware of that and don't be saying things you wouldn't say on the street corner. So I think that awareness program will continue. And users are a great detection method sometimes, right? They're going to notice something wrong, and if you can train them to report it, they're another good source of information.
Definitely, thank you. Pekka?
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the areas that we found we had to really refine is, as more users went home, we had to refine our data loss prevention. So they want to be able to print at home. We're like, well, hold on, their printer wasn't allowed before that. Simple thing. And then they blame security is what, usually happened. And another thing is they want to use thumb drives or something. Like, why are you using a thumb drive at home if you have internet? And we had to start asking questions, but it gave us use cases of scenarios we didn't consider of what would impact the business or the mission. So we got more data from them from putting that, home users at home. We actually got tons of data about how they do business, and then started looking at how do we refine our data loss prevention. We've invested before that a lot, quite heavily in firewalls and network IPSs, and then said, well, that's still there, but let's focus on the user side and understanding what they're doing and how to refine their DLP and where their data is. If we had a user that would download terabytes of data, they'd get a phone call from the SOC. Why are you downloading? Why are you being a data hoarder? For those of you that remember, Tesla had an example where they had an employee on day 3 download terabytes or gigs of data and then try to move it to their personal cloud service, Dropbox or something else. And that should have set up an alarm immediately. Why is that employee doing that on day 3? Or even day 30 or later on, anytime. But those kind of things we start looking very closely of. And they get a phone call or some validation of. So we got very close to our users and understanding what they're doing. I'm curious for the panelists, have you guys deployed DLP? Have you found it helpful in your data protection strategy? And that could be endpoint, network, or even cloud. I'm using DLP as an example because that was one of the lists that Dr. Ponemon had as number 1, top security that was effective in protecting breaches.
Yeah, we do have some DLP in place, Petco. It is helpful in detecting what it's configured for, right? And we're currently doing it by both size and some the pattern indicators. I see it as an exciting, area as we can define more patterns that we're interested in. I mean, certainly as a government agency, we don't have a lot of credit card data that's important. So we have SSN, which is a great pattern to look for, but like a credit card thing, not as important. So if we can define more data types that equate to our sensitive information, it's another powerful tool. And I do want to, I'm sorry. I do want to agree with you, Petco. We found a lot of instances early on in the pandemic, especially where we had to take a look at how we'd done cybersecurity before to enable, remote workers to continue doing their work in a secure way. We had to adjust some policies, procedures, or old ways of thinking and go, let's do a new way of thinking.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, it's one area that I've been exploring at our team here is how do I take that DLP and behavior of the user to inform all my firewalls? So that way I don't have to manage the rule sets. I can just say, do I trust the user? Do I trust the device? And I don't have to manage ports and protocols on a firewall. It's just getting too complex, especially I imagine, the Postal Service has a large infrastructure of firewalls and other things that create complexity. But thank you. Thank you, Paul.
I wanted to chime in here just with my other hat, right, which is the records management hat, right, and how we're using DLP. Obviously, we're using it on the privacy side, right, understanding where our sensitive data is, what data is out there and is open to everyone, right, what can we encrypt, but also what we found is a whole heck of a lot of stale data, right? And so this is where I would say like the partnership outside of the cybersecurity community and the privacy community, getting engaged with the PRA community or the records management community. One of the things we're working on now is what is all this stale data, right? That nobody's touched for years. Why do we have it? Do we still need it? Can we get rid of it? Can we offload it in terms of storage? Because, hey, records management, reduce your threats surface, right? Your target surface. If there are thousands upon records that we can get rid of, that then the cybersecurity community no longer has to protect, or we can move to the right container where there is appropriate protections as opposed to designing a new solution, right? That is savings across the board and prevention of attack across board, or not prevention of attack, but mitigating the likelihood of success of attack. So, what I would say is we have started to use DLP more and more, right? Fine tuning it has been an exercise to make sure it suits our needs. Like we look for VINs, right? Those are sensitive data types for us. We have VINs, across the country, social security numbers, obviously, but we also have a lot of pseudo SSNs that we look at, and we need to think about how to protect them probably differently than we protect standard SSNs. So we have Airman Certificate ID numbers, and for a large segment of our population, they were using their social security numbers for that, right? And so they're a balancing test, like when you're sending this across the clear and those sorts of things. But I think this stronger engagement outside of the cybersecurity community, like who else can leverage your product and your process for the furtherance of their process, right? Building that community and investment, again, going back to this whole business approach, even within the IT community. And then I also wanted to say in terms of the pandemic, right? It obviously gave us an opportunity to digitally transform a lot of our business processes, and some of those processes that were on the edge, and folks were like, oh, we're very comfortable with the way that we do things, right? In the in-office world, right? We had to fundamentally retool, and that certainly gave us the leverage, the tipping point to go to full digital world, which then actually exposed a number of poor security practices in the old business model that we were able to eradicate by thinking about cybersecurity upfront as we move to a new digital platform.
Thank you, Claire. And Gregory, did you want to add something as well?
Yeah, I can add on to several of the points. I think to Claire's point, we started off today's conversation about our digital transformation journey. And 18 months ago, I started an effort to look at application retirement because when you bring on a new application, there's a lot of remnants that are left over that nobody goes back and cleans up. And that's something that, to Claire's point, can save the organization financially, because you have a lot of data sitting on servers that are alive that don't need to be alive. So if there's any information security practitioners out there and you're in, well into your digital transformation journey, look at your application retirement, look at those artifacts that still exist out in your infrastructure, and make sure that they're gone. Domain names, firewall routes, all that sort of thing that need to be cleaned up. Another, we started this conversation on DLP, really excited about a project that we're working on to do asset tagging as well as rights management in the Postal Service, and looking really at NARA from a controlled unclassified information perspective as a framework for us to organize how to do asset tagging. And then with those asset tags, train our employees and personnel in order to be able to properly manage that information to be properly protected. And then I think just briefly on the pandemic, I moved from having my telework program under a magnifying glass and put it under a microscope. Going remote from a telework perspective in the Postal Service was extremely countercultural. We did it without fail, but I think we needed to really innovate. And I think focusing on understanding who we were competing with relative to an adversary perspective. We had Carnegie Mellon come in and really punch holes in the thought process around how we did connection. And we improved our always-on VPN infrastructure relative to our clients' infrastructure as a result of some of the engagement that we had. That's just one example. I could go on for too long, but I'll hand it back to you, Kirsten.
Thank you. Great answers, guys. So let's try and get through as many audience questions as we can before time is up. Bob Mariner asks, are any of the agencies on our panel right now utilizing the MITRE ATARC framework to help prevent and mitigate data breaches?
Absolutely. That's in our the thought process all the time on our security operations center team. Is they're looking. They refer to that as a tool, right? A thought tool about how do we interject ourselves to either detect, prevent along this cyber kill chain. Yep.
Cool.
Yeah, it's an organizing thought around my security orchestration and automation response activities. And to Paul's point, we use it as an thought organizing threat examination framework.
Thank you. Does that go for you as well, Claire?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Next question. Some vendors of DLP tools provide federal identification rules. Has anyone implemented federal specific rule packs, and did these rules help? Must be a good question.
We have not, and actually I wasn't aware of the federal rules pack. Something to look into.
Okay, yeah. Whoever asked that question, maybe reach out to me so that we can bring it to the attention of our working groups here at ATARC. Loi, who's a member of our working group here. Hi, Loi. Thank you for the feedback of the panelists. I would like to know if panelists have considered micro-segmentation per zero trust as part of their security best practices for the digital transformation. Gregory's nodding his head yes.
Of course. I think that's SolarWinds is an excellent example of the need for micro-segmentation. I think that whenever you can compartmentalize assets away from each other and keep your jewels in the one vault and your diamonds in the other vault and gold elsewhere, it's a good idea.
Thank you.
Greg, I love that analogy. Separate your crown jewels. Don't just put them all in one safe.
So we are coming up to the end of our panel. Let's do rapid fire, 10 seconds or less. Any parting advice that you would like to leave our audience with as they try to stay agile and reduce significant breaches, or anything you just want to end the panel with? Let's do rapid fire, starting with Claire.
I would just say collaborate, 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 right? It's not IT alone. It's not cybersecurity alone. This is one of those activities that takes a village. Bring in as many stakeholders as you can, get their perspectives, get their buy-in, let them see the value of what you're doing.
Great. Dr. Poneman?
Very easy. The rapid fire is, please read our reports, give us feedback. It's it's a wonderful opportunity to sit next to such smart people, virtually sit next to some smart people. So the end result is, please get a copy of the report, read it, tell me what you think, and we really would appreciate that.
Great, thank you. Over to you, Petco.
I'm just going to say two things. Let's focus. I love the fact we're focusing on the users, the mission, and the data. Everything else, technology-wise, is really just a security control. And I think we just keep forgetting. Sometimes we get stuck in technology and forget about the user and the data. So I love that we're focusing on the crown jewels and putting them in different safes. I love that we're focusing on understanding the behavior of the users. So, let's keep doing that.
Thank you. And Gregory?
I spent a lot of time in Eastern Europe working with law enforcement and intelligence over there. They taught me to trust no one, not your wife, not your girlfriend, and not your lover. And I think that goes right to zero trust. And I think that we can't trust our user communities to do the things that are necessary in order to be able to protect our infrastructure. We have to have sets of controls that allow us to be able to protect our resources.
Thank you. And Paul?
Inventory and discovery. You can't protect what you don't know about. You also can't, it's harder to defend against what you don't know about. So have your threat awareness, so have awareness both internal and external of what's going on. And then take that all a business approach to put the controls, the best controls where they need to be put to get the most out of your cybersecurity dollar.
Thank you, guys. This has been an awesome hour, and unfortunately that is all the time we have today. So I want to thank our partners at ForcePoint and our amazing panelists. Thank you all for joining us today, and we hope to see you again this Thursday for another ATARC After Lunch webinar series. Next time, we're going to be hearing from topic experts as they discuss growing priority, implementation, necessity, and vision for the future of DevSecOps in the federal landscape. And please go register. We really look forward to it, and I hope to see you all there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.